In keeping with the Halloween theme I started last week here at the Readable Podcast, I've decided to have a little bit of fun with you. Now, I'm going to be offering up 13 spooky selections for you to consider in your reading this Halloween season. Let's jump into it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Readable Podcast. My name is Eddie Hood, and I am so excited to be here because we are taking a little bit of a break from the seriousness of the podcast. Now, as you know, I tend to talk about reading slowly and taking notes and applying the ideas. It's a very philosophical place for us to be. But when Halloween comes, I can't help but let my childish nerd out. And I thought, you know what? I want to talk about spooky books today, books that have made my skin sort of tingle. And I want to share them with you because it is now going to be the middle of September by the time you get this episode. And I want to give you enough time to pick your Halloween read. So I have 13 selections for you today. Hopefully one of these will get you excited. Now, I'm not going to do these in any particular order because I just want to talk and nerd out about these books. But you've probably read some and others you haven't. And so I would love to hear from you in the comments down below what you think of this selection and what you would add to or even take away from if you were to curate this list yourself. Now, if you're listening to the podcast, I have a feature where when you open up the podcast, you can chat with me. There's a little link that says send me a message. Go ahead and click that and you could have a conversation with me. Now, unfortunately, I can't reply back. The technology doesn't allow me to do that, and I have no idea who is sending the question. But I will at least get the question and can address it on future episodes. So we're going to go right into the OG of spooky books, and we're going to be talking about Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, if you've not read this book and you have not sort of connected yourself with Dracula, right? The count who is just so mysterious and so confident and just so engaging that when you're reading it, you feel like you're being seduced by this sort of monster. This is a great book. Now, a couple of things I love about Dracula. One is that it is written in journal form. You probably know that if you've played around with it a little bit, but you're reading this from several people's sort of journal entries, and it's just such a great thing to experience how they interact with each other and sort of how they work. But I don't know why this book is so scary. I think it's the mysteriousness of Dracula. You never quite know what he's going to do, and as the characters interface with him, you're scared for your life. So you might have seen the movies, you might have read certain books, but if you've not read the full Dracula by Bram Stoker, consider doing it this year. Get it off of your to-do list and read this thing. It is really good. The second one isn't really considered a horror book or a Halloween book even, but it is a dark book in nature and made my skin tingle when I read it. And it is Cormac McCarthy's The Road. This is a book about a father and a son in sort of an apocalyptic situation where they are trying to survive. It makes you feel that sense of loneliness and that sense of love and family, but in the midst of chaos and scariness, right? Because I think the scariest monsters we sort of have to interface with are ourselves. Human beings can be scary. Do you guys remember when the pandemic hit and we were getting information on the news stations that, for example, all of the toilet paper was gone, that people were fighting in the supermarkets over toilet paper? That made me think of Cormac McCarthy's The Road, because human beings, we are herd animals, and we will survive at any cost. We will do whatever it takes to survive, even if it means harming each other to whatever extent. It's a terrifying thing. And I think those stories that exhibit that or showcase that make me the most scared. Yes, Dracula is scary, but it's not real, right? Stuff like The Road, though, could happen, and people are crazy. They are crazy, and human beings, yeah, they get to me. All right. Number 3, of course, we cannot have a Halloween spooky reading list without the king himself, Edgar Allan Poe. I love Poe. This was my copy of Poe's work from high school. I bought this so long ago, and I used to carry it with me down the halls of high school. 1, because I've always loved Halloween, and 2, because I just love Poe's style. I've always been drawn to short story and poetry, and he is the master of both. You've probably come into contact with much of his work, not just The Raven, which is a great poem, but lots of his stories. You've probably heard of The Telltale Heart and so on. One of my favorite stories, though, we read in, I think, 11th grade English, which is what caused me to buy this book. Mr. Pendleton, if you're listening to this, thank you for asking me to read The Cask of Amontillado. Amontillado. The Cask of Amontillado is this terrifying story of a man who takes revenge on another person. And I won't give it away, but I will say that it is one of those being buried alive stories. And so it's only a few pages. It's not that long. Let's see, this goes from page 274 to 280, 6 pages. In 6 pages, right, Poe managed to terrify me as an 11th grader in high school. I went out and bought the book, and I haven't looked back since. Edgar Allan Poe, you guys, you really need to read these books, or these stories. There's a reason why he stuck around for so long. It's amazing to me that somebody can write something so long ago, and we are still enthralled with it today. That is the mark of great literature. Now, the next one is a more contemporary piece. It's Dennis Lehane's Mystic River. Mystic River is a really gritty sort of murder, cop, investigation sort of thing. You're going to really like Mystic River. You've probably seen it. It says that there's a film. Yeah, there's a film of this. I haven't watched it yet, but I think Sean Penn's in it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Big movie, but I tend to just read the books. I'm not so good at watching the movies. But this book, I liked it so much, I bought 3 copies. I don't even know why. I just bought a couple copies and thought, I'll have one at the office, one at home, I'll give one away. But I liked Mystic River quite a bit. It's one of those books, and fair warning, where once you start it, you probably will finish it. It will sit with you, and you won't be able to put it down. It's definitely a page turner. Okay, this is a little more of a contemporary. Well, it's not contemporary. I mean, we're talking about C.S. Lewis here. Screwtape Letters is a fun book. This is a book that takes on the concept of looking at how the devil does his dirty work. He sends out this little pawn named Wormwood to try and tempt or ruin the life of the main character, the protagonist. And this whole story is a story of good and evil, and it's also written in these letters, these styles of letters, from the devil to Wormwood. It's been a long time since I've read this one, but I loved it because how many people have taken on the perspective of the demon? It's usually the perspective of the protagonist, right? But you are trying to figure out how we feel our temptations, how we feel our darker side, and how we are pushed and pulled around as human beings. It's a really good look. And whether you are religious or not, you can look at this book from a psychological perspective or a metaphysical perspective, however you decide to do so. But the Screwtape Letters is fun. It's easy to read as well, you guys. It's short. I mean, this is like 205-ish pages, 210 pages, and you really can't go wrong. So that's book 5 in our list of 13. And yes, I did pick 13 books because we are going with an unlucky number today, because that's just how I feel. I'm just feeling like that. The next book is one that scared the bejesus out of me. I read it. I don't know when I read this thing, but it really got a hold of me. And then, of course, you have to watch this movie. This is Stephen King's Misery. So Misery is the story of a psychotic nurse who essentially finds her favorite celebrity, which is an author, in a car accident on the side of the road. It's a very wintry scene, and she rescues him from this car accident, brings him home, and she nurses him to health. But she does so in a way that is terrifying, and she is essentially threatening him with his life unless he writes the perfect story for her. It is this fantastic look at how authors sort of engage with their audience in a really unhealthy way, and vice versa, how that communication can happen. And the main character, Paul Sheldon, in this is fantastic. The movie, though, you got to watch the movie after you read the book, because this is one of the few cases where I can say that the movie parallels the quality of a book. Most Stephen King movies are miserable, right? The books are great. The movies are miserable. You can call me out on that if you don't agree, but this instance, Misery stands up to the book, and it's because of Kathy Bates. Kathy Bates plays the crazy nurse, and she just crushes that role. I made my wife watch it because she's also a nurse, and it got to her. It definitely got to her. Now, the next one is what we would call a slow burn. So if you're the kind of person that likes slow burn thrillers or mysteries or spooky stories, instead of the hard-hitting kind of stuff, this one's for you. This is called Snow Falling on Cedars. I've recommended it in my newsletter before. But this is a legal thriller that takes place on a small island, and it is where a man essentially gets framed for a murder because of his race, right? He's a Japanese American, and at the time, because of the war and what have you, there's some prejudice around Japanese Americans, and so he gets this murder pinned on him, and he has to try and find his way out of it. And it is just this really, really beautifully set book. The writing in here is the writing that you feel, right? It's not hard hitting and gritty, like I said. It's just very atmospheric, and it is very. There's a quality to it that I think you'll love. But Snow Falling on Cedars by David Gutterson, Gutterson, a beautiful book, and it's one that I really like to read at night when I'm lying in bed. It's that kind of book where it's not so intense that I'm not going to be able to sleep after. It just sort of sets the scene and gets me in a fictional world. It's a little spooky, it's a little mysterious, but it's not like full on Halloween. It's good. Okay, I have to save these for last because they're my favorites. Let's see. We are on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Book number 8 is a classic whodunit murder mystery, and you have to have Agatha Christie in this list. We all know, if you've been listening to the show for any length of time, that I'm a Christie nerd. But it's the murder of Roger Ackroy. So this is one of her first novels, which is incredible because the woman had serious chops in writing murder mystery stuff, even in the beginning of her career, and it shows in this book. So the murder of Roger Ackroy is the kind of book that sets the stage that so many other murder mystery movies would follow. It's that kind of story where you have a murder happen in this big, beautiful mansion, and there's a cast of characters that are sort of locked into that story. And then the detective, who in this case is Hercule Poirot, sort of shows up and solves the mystery and points out who done it. The funny thing is because this was in the beginning of her career, and she's writing, this is one of the first books of Hercule Poirot, but she put this at the end of his career. So he is a retiring detective at this point. And the book did so well, and the community loved Poirot so much that she brought him back to life and started rewriting more Poirot novels from the beginning of his career. All right. Next is probably the most beautifully designed book cover I have ever seen. I will be selling this book in Edgewater Bookstore, which is my bookstore, opening October 23rd, by the way. If you're interested in following along with that story, go to edgewaterbookstore.com and you can put in your email there and you'll get first in line benefits. I'm actually going to be having a party on October 23rd at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, which is 9 p.m. Eastern Time. For everybody that comes, you'll get a discount code for your first purchase. I'll show you the books that I'm selling and a few other things. This is one of them. It's called The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. This book is unlike any book you've ever read, and I can promise you that now. The cast of characters in this are fantastical and magical and odd. It's really a satire on it's a political satire, much like 1984 by George Orwell, but it's looking at a different version of politics. And that might sound boring to you, but it's not. What it's trying to do here is look at how human beings can be so crazy when things are really not going as planned. And the characters in here are fun because you have the devil, which is why it's included in our little book of list of 13 here for Halloween. But you've got this giant cat that's my favorite character in it. He's like a super witty cat. He's always like drinking whiskey and smoking and like causing trouble. And you've just got a lot of fun things happening in here. You've got witches, and there's this point in the story where you've got this big grand ball that is being hosted by the devil, and all of the people in attendance are like dead, and they're all of the people from hell, and they've come to this big ball, and they're murderers, and they're, all sorts of sinners of every kind, and he's welcoming them, and it's a crazy story. You guys, it's really crazy, but it's fun. So if you're looking for something a little out of the norm, The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov is a good one to check out. Okay, Let's talk about Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. This is a collection of that story as well as other short stories. This is not a long story by any means. It's, let me see here, maybe 80 pages. I don't know. It's not long. But The Metamorphosis is probably his most famous story. And it's the concept of a man who wakes up in the morning, not as himself, but as a housefly. Yeah, and he has to sort of go through life with that, deformity. We'll just call it that. So again, this is not a traditional Halloween book. It's not spooky, but it's got that weird sort of spooky element to it. And if you're looking for something a little off the wall that is not a full novel and you just want to try something a little more classic, check out Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. 3 more to go, and I've left my 3 favorite until the very end. So I hope you have stuck around for this. Now, before I get into them, I'd like to encourage you to leave me a comment down below. Again, I'm trying to grow my channel here, and the comments really help. They sort of show, I know it doesn't affect YouTube analytics, but it does show that there's a community building here. It encourages other people to watch the videos and to leave comments. So if you like these books, let me know down below. And again, if you'd like to add to this list, please do so. Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes is a book that I read probably every 3 years, maybe so. Not every year. I find that Ray Bradbury, for me, although he's one of my favorite writers, his style of writing is so plush and electric and just sort of thick in wording that I have to sort of build up some stamina to read Ray Bradbury. He's definitely somebody who's got a way of describing the things. It's very colorful. I can't think of a better author to describe the sort of fall season, right? In small towns when the leaves are turning colors and the monsters are coming out and things are just off kilter, his language is perfect for that. And so he was the ultimate author for Something Wicked This Way Comes. I think this story was made for him. It's a fun story about 2 little boys who experience a carnival that comes into town. And the carnival is not a normal carnival. In fact, it's a sort of a magical carnival with an evil element to it. And the people in the town are sort of being subjected to this evil sort of influence. And I like it too because it's small enough, especially this mass market paperback thing. I can stick this kind of book in my back pocket and take it with me to wherever I go. That way I've always got my book with me. But this is a fun Halloween book if you're looking for something that you've heard of but maybe haven't read. Something Wicked This Way Comes. Okay, book number 12 is going to be my favorite book of all time. It is Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Now, this is a classic Russian novel, and I want to prepare you for this book. First of all, we're going to be reading it in book club. So if you go to the readwellpodcast.com, you click on the book club link there, you'll see our schedule of books that we're reading, and this is in season 2 of that reading list. We'll be coming up on that soon. But and I mention that because if you want to read this book with a group, because you're a little maybe concerned about absorbing its material, with it being older and more classic, and Russian literature especially takes a little bit of experience for you to enjoy it. Just getting around the names and how they pronounce the names and the sheer immensity of the names can make these books hard to access. But if you can get through that, Crime and Punishment is a really good use of your time. And I think it's a great book for Halloween. There's this really creepy murder that happens in here, and then sort of the outcome of that. You get to experience what the murderer goes through after making that choice. Where in the beginning he, being Raskolnikov, feels justified in what he's doing, and then that sort of tragedy weighs on his soul, and you get to see him just completely break down as a human being. And so that's the whole point of the title, right? There was a crime, and then he experiences the punishment because of it. That internal turmoil that happens is great, because I think we all make mistakes in life, and I think we've all felt guilty for doing certain things or feel bad, and this book is an exploration of that. So again, not a Halloween book, but definitely creepy in nature, and it's a great book to experience. Book number 13. This is my favorite. I'm I'm not going to call it creepy, but sort of spooky, mysterious, enigmatic book that, and I've shared it on the book podcast before. I will share it for the rest of my life. The first time I read it, I felt it. This is a book that you will feel. You know, when you read books sometimes and you're like, oh, that was great. I get the characters, that was fun, whatever. This book is different. This book has atmosphere to it, and you are in this book every step of the way. There are secret passages. There's this big, beautiful castle house, and I'm going to give it away. The home is called Manderley, and the characters themselves are just bold. They are bold and beautiful and devious in all sorts of ways. That, of course, this book is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Now, I've recommended this book before, and every time I recommend it, people always come back and thank me for this recommendation. They are shocked at how much they loved Rebecca. And I can say probably the same for you. If you take the time to read this book, you will love it. This is not a hard book to read. It is a thriller in nature. It is a mystery in nature, and it is just atmospheric. Again, great for Halloween. Okay, that's it for this week's episode of the Readable Podcast. Now, before you go, I would like to encourage you to do one thing for me. So, again, if you haven't yet done so, go to edgewaterbookstore.com. I'm trying to get this bookstore off the ground, and any amount of community support I can get, I would really appreciate. The best thing is for you to just be aware that the bookstore is coming and tell your friends about it, share the link with them. Boy, if you could post it on social and say, hey, there's this great new bookstore coming online. I'd love for you to check it out. That would mean a lot. I'm just trying to get the word out. It's kind of hard to do that on a small business, and so definitely need the community support on that. Again, thank you for being here. I hope you found a book in this list that you're excited to read in Halloween. Again, leave me a comment down below if you think there's a better book we should add to this list. And until next time, as always, remember to read slowly, take notes, and apply the ideas. I'll see you guys next week.